about the record. Well, so the recording has been launched. Sorry about that. I do miss that periodically. All right. See, if I make you co-host, I don't want to add too many duties to you, Jessica, because you'll be screen sharing, and that might be enough. Whereas I have Julie as co-host at the moment, so that she can help admit people who might be joining later.
That's perfect. I just mean that if for some reason I'm unable to share my screen because I'm not, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
All right. So let me. I'll stop sharing, and let's give it a go with you sharing.
Daryl, the variance hearing is for 7:30. Didn't know if you wanted to go to other business.
Yes, I think we might. Let's leave the reorganization of the other parts of the reorganization of the board until later, and let's take care of people who may be present who are waiting. So, Mark, did you see people here for any of your items?
I'm sorry, Daryl. Lee Cavallo joined us a few minutes ago. I don't know if there's anyone, and he's here for 85 Maple to talk about the building application. And then 50 Hunting. I don't know if the homeowner's here or not. I don't.
Hi, Mark. Mark, this is Brian Phillips. I'm here.
Okay,
so Hunting.
Excellent,
Sorry, I couldn't be here at the last meeting. So
that's okay. Brian, I'm glad you're here. I think you were here before leave, so I believe
yes.
I
agree with that.
We could talk about 50 Hunting. There are plans available that were resubmitted by the builder.
Okay, and Jessica, could you open up the plan so we can take a look together? Great, thank you.
Oh, thanks.
And so the main
appreciate this. I'm in Germany. It's getting late over here.
Oh, geez.
Wow. Yeah, I actually was in Spain for a meeting once, and it was 2 o'clock in the morning when I was I was traveling. But anyways, back to what you're doing, Brian. Your builder resubmitted. If Daryl, if you want, I can present. Your builder resubmitted showing a half bath for the room over the garage. So that I believe the board met at the last meeting, and that was the main concern: is the full bathroom would have made it a master bedroom. So we can show the rest of those plans. Jessica, I don't know if you can move forward on the
I think
plan.
you can scroll down. He has a simplified picture. Yeah.
Right there, Jessica. Thank you. So,
okay, and so that's the current garage?
It is. And, so that we're not at it. What we're doing is there's a current garage with a room over the garage there. And the real driver of this whole project is I want a bigger garage because I'm a car guy. And so today it's 26 wide and 24 deep. So we're adding another bay to the right, and it's a high bay. And because we have low ceilings in the garage, and the room above the garage today is over the entire footprint of the 26 by 24. So it gets a little bit bigger in this footprint here, but 2/3 of the garage would have the room over the garage, and 1/3 of it would not, which is what you see on the right. And that's an office room today, but we're going to turn it into an exercise / office room.
So and the only way
sorry, Darryl,
to access that is from the first floor. Is that correct?
That's right. So, if that roof that you see there is the connection between the main house and the garage, it's a split cape. The main house is to the left of everything at an angle. And then there's like a connection pathway that's underneath that roof that's single floor. And that connects over to the garage. And you have to walk up those stairs to get to the upstairs. It doesn't connect to the second floor of the rest of the house where the bedrooms are.
Okay, good, because that's one of the, since we usually view any room above the first floor as being a bedroom, however, if it does look more like a first floor room and that it's not connected to the other bedrooms, so that is an important criteria that we've applied to homes throughout town, so that is consistent and not counting it as a bedroom. And it's a half bath, which is also very important. Full bath would make it a bedroom suite.
I see. Yeah. Okay.
which is
We just thought
usually,
it'd be convenient if it was there because we want to use it as an exercise room, but that's okay. That's not a big deal.
yeah, I mean,
And they reduced the
because,
size, they reduced the size of the bathroom and will be putting a closet next to it where the original bath shower was located.
Right.
okay. Right, and that's part of the connection to the rest of the second floor is because there usually is a full bath present on a second floor, and hence the connection gives that room access as you would expect for a bedroom. So a little bit of the background on that.
Got it.
Okay, and then I think we were, confused a bit by some of the other room counts. So Jessica, if you can slide down to another, but this set was easier to understand, I thought. So in the basement, have some rooms, but I saw a note, there it is, all floors are concrete.
Yeah, there's no HVAC or anything in the basement. It's, concrete floor, no heating or anything, and it's a pretty dank space. So
Okay, but the ceiling and the walls are finished, but the floor is concrete. Is that
correct.
the condition? Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know that I have any
Well,
particular
most of the
issues with
ceiling
that.
and walls down there are not finished. It's raw, you know, uh, open ceiling in most of the areas. Only part of it has somewhat of a ceiling in it.
And is it walkout or bulkhead?
It is walkout to the right,
Okay.
where that's where the existing exercise stuff is. That does walk out into the backyard.
Mm-hmm. Does anyone else on the board have any questions or comments on that?
I'm okay with the basement as it exists. If another building application comes in, we'll need to do another room count if there's any consideration for finishing the basement rooms.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then let's
First.
scroll to the first floor. Oh, I guess
That's
the
the second
floor
floor.
first. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Second floor has 2 bedrooms,
Yeah.
and here's the first floor.
The second floor is
Okay.
2 bedrooms and a full bath, and then the first floor is the master bedroom on the left with a full bath, and then the living room and kitchen den.
You have 4 rooms total on the first floor, 2 on the second, and you're proposing the 7th room over the garage, that being allowed for a 3-bedroom septic that you do have on site there.
And I mean, the 7th room already exists. We're just redoing it.
Understandable.
Yep.
Yeah.
You're at your max is all I was trying to indicate, which is
I
fine.
see.
It's okay for a 3-bedroom. If you ever did want to consider finishing the basement for the walkout side, that would have to you'd have to upgrade the septic system. But you're going to be maxing out, you are maxed out presently, as you said, the room exists with the
I
7
see.
room.
Got it.
Main concern here was making sure the room over the garage did not appear as a bedroom.
Got it. Because of septic, correct?
Correct. This septic system at this point is only designed for a 3-bedroom. There's
Right.
always an opportunity to replace it. That's
Right.
expensive ordeal, but down the road, that is another consideration you may want to follow if you wish to add more rooms.
Very good.
I don't really have any other questions. It looks like 7 rooms and 3 bedrooms to me. Does anyone else on the board have any comments?
No, I agree. I think the fact that they, thank you, Brian, for reducing that down to a half bath. And then clarifying the basement. I'm all set with that.
Yeah,
If I
I'm
can-
all set also. Thank you.
Okay, so Mark, are you looking for us to?
To give you a final review and approval, and then what will need to happen. This came in as a preliminary building application. So Brian and his builder would need to resubmit this to the building department as a building application. At that point, I would review it again, and as long as the plans match what the board saw tonight, it would receive approval.
Okay.
Fair
All right.
enough.
Do you feel a need for a vote from us, Mark, or you're all set with?
Consensus is there. Maybe a vote would be good because that's how we do it with others. I would suggest the
Yeah.
board vote on the plans that you saw tonight.
Okay, so do we have a motion to authorize Mark to approve the plans provided that they, the new plans that come in, provided that they are reflective of what we have seen this evening?
So moved.
Seconded.
Any further discussion? Hearing none?
Julie Dreyfus, aye.
Diana Hook, aye.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
Darrell Beardsley, aye. Okay,
Thank you, Brian.
thank you.
Thank you all for doing this first. I appreciate that. But anyway, thanks, everybody.
Okay,
Take care.
have a good evening.
Okay. Bye-bye.
We have 7
so-
minutes, Darrell. I don't know if you want
Yeah,
to take a look at the ballot.
85 Maple, perhaps?
Yeah, Lee is here. I saw him show up.
Let's see if we can.
Yeah, he requested that the board review the room, and at the same time, I should let the board know that Lee has had his engineer submit a septic plan for 6 bedrooms. We can't review it until we get conservation review, which I'm hoping will come soon. So he's planning to expand the system once that happens. If it is a 6-bedroom house, it can have up to 13 rooms. And he can have the 6 bedrooms. And so I think that's the main intent. But tonight, before the consideration for the revised septic plan, there was the discussion on 3 different concepts that the board was presented with outside of a meeting. And I got consensus that removing all the walls in the hallway would be the plan at that point to consider for the building application. But Lee was offered to come back to the board and review the other 2 considerations that he provided. So I believe they are on the agenda. I hope they are. And if not, we can discuss it because one was like
Yeah.
half wall and the other one was walling it in. So
Yeah, I'm not seeing those plans in the list of documents, so
let
I
me-
might have it.
I know it came through by email.
Yes.
And I can check too while you're doing that. Let me just.
Lee, do you have that you could share with us? So we're not hunting and pecking for it?
Yeah. I mean, so Deshang is here. I honestly don't know if it's even worth pursuing this. I mean, we got notice that the plans were received by conservation for the amended septic, so we were hoping that maybe we could just address that because that kind of just supersedes this whole room thing. Because right now we
okay.
remove the room, so I
Okay.
don't really want to waste anyone's time if it's kind of a moot point.
So once we get the determination from the Conservation Commission, then your plans will be on the docket for review. And once they're reviewed, and if they meet our requirements, then they'll be forwarded to the Board of Health for their review and hopefully approval. So that indeed what might resolve your room issue, your room count issue.
Okay. Yes, because I thought that there was a plan just for the other members that there were still the two sides of the walls. Obviously, the outer wall with the window is still
Correct.
present.
The
wall that we saw that was to the left was present, and then only a shorter wall on the right side that just provided a bit of a screen to the stairwell.
Yes.
And
We just
that,
eliminated the whole room, and rather than pursue that aspect further, we figured it would make more sense based off speaking with Deshang to just pursue the 6-bedroom plan because we have the room to fit it.
oh, all right,
6
that's good. And as somebody who has worked from a home office for 30 years, I can't imagine not having a door I could shut to close out the rest of, other activities going on. So
Yeah.
I have to say that might work out better. Okay. So then you're all set for now, and certainly if you have information, we do have another meeting on June 5th. take this up then if need be, but if it is compliant with new construction, then Mark, you can approve it, correct?
Well, actually, no, the board's gonna need to approve the revised septic plan. So that's
Oh,
the
okay.
part. I do have up the email that Lee sent, and the board was involved with the removing of, not the board, I should say, two of the members, the chair and the vice chair at that time were involved with saying that remove all the walls was fine. The other two option was to have a large single small wall in a little bit of a separation from the hallway. And the last idea was create a 117 entryway to the office. And as Lee said, he now prefers to make that an office. And as you said, Daryl, it would provide for privacy. And unfortunately, that creates it as a bedroom as well. But hopefully, if the timing is right and we get conservation review completed, I'll be able to review the plan either the first or the second meeting in June. But I do know that Lee's in a rush, so I'm hoping we'll get conservation review so I can start my review of the septic plan. I know two things that would have had to happen is the leaching dust to increase in size, and hopefully they won't have any issues with distance to wetlands. And the other one would be the septic tank. I believe may have to be larger. I will look at that to make sure it may be large enough because it's a 5-bedroom, but I'll be looking at those two major factors when I take a look at the revised septic plan.
So just
Okay.
to understand, so it would have to go. In order for a permit to be approved, it has to go back to a meeting as well.
That is correct. That's a procedure the board has, is that all septic plans are approved, reviewed and approved by the Board of Health. That is correct.
So I don't know if it's Deshang, and just let you know that we only have one meeting in June because this third Wednesday of June is Juneteenth, which is a state holiday, so we cannot have a meeting on that day. So if it's possible to get this worked out in time to be placed on the June 5th meeting, and with enough time for Mark to review it before the June 5th meeting, then that would be good. I know that's not a lot of time, but. And then if we need to have a special meeting, we could try to do that. But the easiest would be to make the 5th deadline.
And I know they've reached out today to conservation to try to get them to move their part along so we can get to our section.
Okay. And
I don't know.
Shang, you have a question?
Yeah, just a quick, I understand, so we definitely want to follow your procedure. But for this case, so Mark, I can, originally we used the 2,000 gallon tanks. That's why we moved toward this 6-bedroom because it's not going to require a new septic design. So it's technically the septic system almost identical than the previously approved. The only change is extended the line from 77 feet to 92 feet. And it's more toward the downgrading. We did the quick check and using the groundwater interpretation. So there's plenty of groundwater separation because we used the most upgraded test pit as our control for groundwater separation design. So more the end extending toward the downgrading, it's actually providing more groundwater separation there. So, and then grading everything is outside of 100 buffer, and everything is outside of 125 for the leaching field. So the septic tank and D-box, it didn't even touch. We didn't even move at all.
I'll take your notes into consideration. I appreciate that, Deshang. It will make.
I hope we can help that with expedited, and so we sending in because we thought we may not even need to go to conservation, but I agree we need it. So when we send in our administrative approval in, and they acknowledge you received it. So Lee, you paid the fee yet, or you are going to drop a check to them already, or?
No, I met with the department today. I gave Deborah a check.
Okay, so everything is in administrative perspective, is everything was stamped, received. I will follow up with the Joyce, but I don't really see any from the conservation's concern, because we technically didn't touch anything in the buffer zone. The only thing was the was outside of 100-foot buffer zone for grading of the extension, and it's
Yeah, as long
already
as, that's
within the
fine.
limit of work.
As
So
long as you're
okay.
on- That's fine, Deshang. Deshang, I was just gonna say, you're surrounded by wetlands, so you would have to make sure the new increase to the soil absorption area is 125 feet from any wetlands.
Yeah, no, we barely made it. But I just probably have a 1 foot more room. It was really tight. Yeah, we observed 125, but setback for the. It's just
Okay. I'm
Appreciate
going
the
to interject
Deshang.
here because we have a variance
hearing.
hearing
Sure.
that we're running a little late on.
Yeah,
And
thank you for I hope
so-
it will help with Mark's review. If you have any questions, Mark, you can shoot me any email or call me. So I hope it's a very straightforward process.
Okay, thank you. Yes, but it is, any changes is always, it's always important to have the
So
plan
June 5th, so we-
re-reviewed by Conservation and Board of Health, just to make sure.
And Terry, can
Okay.
can you put us on the 5th, because I know Lee is almost in the process to do the work, and I think seems like we have plenty of room for Joyce of conservation to get that.
We will tentatively plan on that, and
Okay.
as long as we get all the information, both from Concom and Mark's opportunity for review. Rebecca,
Hope we can work it out. Thank you. Appreciate it.
okay, Rebecca?
I just have a question about this sequence of the meeting. Are we done with this subject?
We should be going to the variance hearing, Daryl, in my view.
Yes, I know.
Just want to know, when are we going to be there was a subject that I proposed be on the agenda that having to do with the format of our meetings. Is that going to be done? Is there a time set for that? Is that going to be done at the end since we have variance hearings, or when will that be discussed? Just curious.
I am not aware of the format of the meetings. What do you mean by that?
At the last meeting, we discussed, there had apparently been some interest in the hybrid versus in-person meeting, this topic.
Okay, hold on then. All right, let's just to keep things moving and get to the variance hearing. Item number 1, under Chair's business, status of Zoom meetings. That will have to take place after we have our variance hearing.
Yeah, so I thought so. I was just confirming that it's going to be at the end of the variance hearings.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. And you're very echoey because I think you have both computer and phone operating. So one
Yes,
of those should be turned off.
I have to do it this way today.
Okay. That's very hard to hear. All right. It is 7:35, so it's time for the variance hearing for a septic replacement at 44 Page Farm Road. And Jessica, are you aware, did we receive all of the green cards? My recollection is that Jean said yes.
I believe you're right, Daryl, on that.
Okay. All right. Then we can open the hearing, and the engineer is present.
Yes, he is.
Log
Yeah,
in.
Dan
Great. So, hello, Dan. So if you would like to explain the circumstances that have led to the request for the variances.
Sure. For the record, Dan McIntyre representing the homeowners at 44 Page Farm Road. And Merritt Scott Johnson is also on the call tonight. So
Yes,
they've been this existing system was constructed in the late 60s. They've been experiencing some periodic problems with it, and they're also planning some interior renovations of the house as well. So they felt it was time to install a new septic system. Just to orientate you with a plan, Page Farm Road is on the right-hand side. You can see the well in the front corner of the lot. And then the house. And the existing system is kind of that clouded area right behind the house is where the existing system is. We're proposing to move it a little bit further back. The soil testing revealed a high groundwater table. It's actually a perched water table at about 3 to 4 feet below grade. The other issue with this particular house is it was a 5-bedroom house built on a 4-bedroom septic system. So during the process, we're going to create kind of fix that problem as well. So we got a 5-bedroom septic for the 5-bedroom house. We did design it as completely conformance with Title V, with the 4-foot groundwater offset, reserve area. We do need a pump to overcome the high groundwater situation. But we're using conventional stone and pipe trenches. And we meet all of the Sherborn regulations with the exception of the groundwater issue. We are asking for 2 variances on that. One is that the groundwater is higher than 5 feet below grade, which is nothing they can do to overcome that. And the second one is we're asking for a waiver on the 5-foot offset to go down to Title V's 4-foot offset. And we're asking for that to try to minimize raising the mound up another foot and then grading into the wooded area and clearing more trees. So I think we've come up with a good plan here to kind of fix the 4 to 5 bedroom situation and get them ready for their interior innovations and get rid of a problem septic system. So I think with that, I can turn it over for questions.
Okay, and does anyone on the board have questions about this?
Dan, the on-site well, are we at 125 feet from the system?
Yes, we exceed that.
Thank you.
Okay, so this one, again, wetlands, setback issues, and as you mentioned, my groundwater is something that can't change, and I do certainly appreciate bringing this house into conformance in terms of adequate capacity to match the size of the house. I don't think I have any.
I can add a few things. Board would
Yeah,
like.
that'd be great, Mark.
Sure. And the first question from Julie is, yes, the well is 150 feet from the septic system and it is an up gradient well. 125 is required based on the perk rates. The other note I wanted to make was the Conservation Commission reviews all, as we talked about the last discussion, they review all the plans and they have reviewed this plan as well and said it was okay to move forward. So, because there were questions coming from one person on Maple Street about the wetlands. I just want to make that clear that this has been reviewed and approved by Conservation. And the other note I wanted to make was Dan and I spoke about the room count, and it was very typical back in the 1970s and 1980s that septic systems were put in for a smaller amount of bedrooms that was actually built. So this is in all respects very conventional in that era. That's just what happened. But now with the new septic system going in, it will be compatible to the bedroom count within the house. And the assessors records all indicate it's a 5-bedroom house as well. But again, there was nobody making errors back in the 1970s. It's just the process that occurred back in those days.
Thank you. That was a good explanation of how these things happen, because we see this with some frequency, thankfully not a huge amount, but some. All right, so let's see. Are there any abutters here who have questions or comments? Okay, I think we'll move on to going through the variances, and you have the variance letter you can bring up, Jessica. Oh, yeah, I didn't see that either.
No, if it's not there, what the board can do is go back to page 1 of the plan, and the 2 variances are written right on the right-hand side in the third box up, I believe. If you want to lodge it, you'll see it over there, and there it is right there. Up, went down. Go back up. I'm sorry. Bring the plans up a little bit. And there they are, right? Up a little more up. I'm sorry. Am I saying?
Okay, I have, yep, and
Yeah.
I've got it too.
It's
looking
further
at it.
down on the plan is what I was going to say. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Jess. It's further down and it's going to show up right there.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Perfect. Perfect.
Okay. Let's see.
Thank
So
you.
there are no local upgrade waiver requests for Title V. So I'll ask, do we have a motion to grant a variance in section 8.01, which has to do with that groundwater offset to be 5 feet, but 4 feet is provided for Title V.
So moved. Oop, sorry, Daryl. So moved.
Seconded.
And any other comments from the board? Hearing none?
Julie Dreyfus, aye.
Diana Hook, aye.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
Darrell Beardsley, aye. And the other is the companion to that, which is 8.02, that the depth to seasonal high groundwater is less than 5 feet. You have a
So
motion
moved.
to approve that variance.
Sorry, Daryl. So moved.
Seconded.
Any further comments? Hearing none?
Julie Dreyfus, aye.
Diana Hook, aye.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
And Darrell Beardsley, aye. So those are, that concludes the variance request, so we can close the hearing. And are the plans ready for approval, Mark?
Yes, they are conditional to a deed recording in respect to the prohibition of a garbage grinder based on the design flow that was provided on the plan.
Okay, so do we have a motion to approve the plans subject to receipt of the deed recording for the garbage grinder?
So moved.
Seconded.
Any further discussion? Hearing none?
Julie Dreyfus, aye.
Diana Hook, aye.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
Darrell Beardsley, aye. So any other questions for us, Dan?
No, I think I'm all set. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Okay. So, all right, back to our items on our agenda, and how about we take the status of Zoom meetings? And at a prior meeting, someone had a question about the fact that we have our meetings via Zoom. And actually, this might be a good place if you have the updated guidance on open meeting law, and that's from the state. So the Zoom meetings were instituted, obviously, during the pandemic as a safety measure, and certainly what's been found across the state, and we've seen it here in Sherborn, is that participation in meetings is significantly up by having Zoom meetings. Certainly the applicants are happy about Zoom meetings because for the consultants that they are hiring for their projects, it's eliminated travel time for them, which is a big deal. So, for instance, for Dan to have come to make a 20-minute presentation could have involved several times that just in travel to and from the meetings. It makes it easier for everyone to see the plans because we can share things and people can look. In the past, in-person meetings, people would come up and try and stand around the table and look at the plans. They want to see it all together. So for a lot of reasons, it's been good for the conduct of these meetings. So in this guidance, though, there are a few key things. So even though the top of the guidance says extending certain COVID-19 measures, does not mean that these measures are in place because of COVID any longer, but it is because this just turned out to be a very nice tool for holding public meetings. So some important points in here. I would say begin. All right. Partway down is, all right. Okay, let's go back to the first page, the third paragraph. It says, first, public bodies may continue providing live, adequate alternative means of public access. And that could be, as it says here, instead of holding it in a public place that's physically accessible to the public. So those alternative means include what we're doing now, which is a Zoom meeting. Also, people are able to join by phone. They may not get the visuals on their phone depending on what's loaded, but it is quite easy. Dial the phone number for Zoom, and then you plug in the meeting number, and you can hear and participate in the meeting in that way. Those are acceptable options at the moment. On the next page, it also talks about what is considered adequate alternative means. Things we've talked about are included in that. There are options for a hybrid meeting, which would be in person and via Zoom. One of the problems with that is that, trying to look for the language here. There's an important point about equal quality for the in-person and the remote participants in those meetings. And often it's someone's disadvantage. It's harder for one of those groups to hear. The audio turns out to be a bit of a hurdle at times. Sometimes not, but sometimes yes. And it's important to them that everyone's on a level field with the access to the meetings and that they have equivalent quality of participation. And are there any other particular comments that people have about?
Yes, I do.
I have comment. I have a
Okay,
couple.
sorry, I did mean the board in that case. I will get to public comment in a moment. But I was just trying to highlight some of the things. Clearly, there's this longer document that talks about the requirements.
I'll comment. I mean,
I comment at some point. Go ahead, Julie.
No, Rebecca, you can go first. You were first in line.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think that there are some advantages to in-person meetings. This was prior, and my understanding was that a body can decide how they want to conduct their meetings. And I think what really matters is that we have public access. I understand and I agree that it's hard for some people in the population, elderly people. My mother is completely unable to do anything with electronics. But so I was wondering if you think there's any value to this. I personally think that it's extremely convenient for me to have the meeting on Zoom, but I miss having in-person meetings. I think there is a value to that. And I was wondering if you think there's a value to it. And since we have the authority to make the decision, would we consider doing some sort of an intermittent in-person meeting that allows individuals who don't feel comfortable with the technology to put something on the agenda of their interest and have that as an option? I'm just throwing it up for your thoughts and for those of the board members.
Okay.
I can respond. I think the challenge, I mean, I agree. It's nice to see people in person, but if we have a variation between sometimes we have an in-person meeting, sometimes we have a virtual meeting, that does not become a reliable system for everyone to know the meeting will be here, wherever that is, virtually or in person. And I think that becomes hard to kind of jump back and forth. I think that this is one of the silver linings of COVID, and there's not very many, but this is one of them. And the fact that people can access meetings from a variety of places is a huge benefit. If you are someone who is working, we just saw an individual tonight who's not even in the country could still participate in this meeting as a result of it being virtual. If you are working and you're commuting, you're traveling, you're stuck in your office or even in your car, you can participate. If you are a parent of school-age kids, fact that you do not have to physically go to a place, hire a babysitter if you don't have another person at home is a huge benefit. If you are someone who has mobility issues, whether that's you've broken your leg or you just have other mobility issues, not having to go out to a meeting in the car and then come back home at whatever hour makes a difference. If you're also someone who is older and is concerned about driving at night, that is a challenge. Like it's a real challenge for people that makes them consider whether or not they're going to be able to attend. And then there's also the weather. Like today was a beautiful day, but there are many days that we have meetings when it might be raining, it's snowing, like not having to go out and do that for everyone is a huge benefit. But I think you make a very good point, Rebecca, which is there is an assumption within this process that everyone is able to understand the process of learning when the meetings are held and how to access them either by phone or through the internet via Zoom. And I think that it's worthwhile pausing and doing kind of a check-in with the community to see if there's in fact a need for better education and resources for individuals who might not know how to do it. I'm with you. My parents would never be able to figure out how to log on to Zoom. They really struggle with that. They also struggle with mobility and can't actually go out to a physical meeting. And so it's a real issue. I would suggest, and I'm volunteering to do this, to reach out to the COA and see if they feel like there is a need in our community. And if so, then it seems like this would be a fantastic partnership with perhaps the library, whose goal is to distribute information, to see if there's a way that we can create access for people, whether that's just explaining to them, how do you find out meeting information for login? How do you call into a meeting? If someone's not sure how to use a Zoom app, having a resource available to them so that they can learn it in a safe environment, for instance, the library. I think that makes a lot of sense. So that wouldn't be something that this board would lead. That's more of a global town issue, but I see your point.
Yeah, can I make it? So I actually think that that is exactly why the suggestion or the recommendation from the state level is that we provide remote access for every meeting, especially those that are held in person. So that issue ends up being taken care of because I agree there are all those issues. My question is slightly different, and that is, would the board consider having a value to having a once a month or once a quarter in-person meeting that has a hybrid option so that everybody who can't get there can access it remotely?
I
don't see what the value, to me, I think that we all know each other well enough and not sure which meeting would somehow have, I think about recent meetings, have there been any where I thought in person would be particularly beneficial to one set of topics on any agenda versus another meeting's topics? And I'm not sure that I could say yes to that.
Well, if the
I
board
think
wanted
that-
to, I'd be willing to come once a month or once every 3 months and have an in-person meeting. That's me, and I'd be totally willing to do it if other people think it's valuable. But it sounds like you don't. So I was just bringing up for discussion.
I think technologically, I'm not confident that we have the audio capabilities at town hall to have good audio so that people who are accessing the meeting remotely would be able to hear us. The few times we've attempted it, it didn't go so well. I mean, not this board, but other boards had attempted hybrid. And I think making sure that all participants can hear clearly is extremely important and in fact outlined in the guidelines.
And I'll second what Julie just said, because another committee had to cancel a meeting at the start because things weren't working particularly well that evening. So that's a disruption too. For us, it would be to variance hearings and getting things scheduled and in on time. So the technology improves. I'm not totally averse to it, but it is more time to be spent traveling. It's more gas usage. And while I agree that Zoom can be quite a hurdle for some people, I think the phone-in option still provides something that is easy to do. And it's the only complexity besides dialing is just entering in whatever it is, a 10-digit number for the meeting ID or 11. And Diana?
Oh, well, I also prefer a remote option just in terms of the decreased travel time. I'm in Boston sometimes, and not having to leave and come back really, really helps, which I'm sure others are also in that position. I was wondering about enabling the chat feature, which would, I think, also help mimic an in-person meeting. That people could drop in references to something we're discussing, could go back and forth with one another without interrupting the meeting. I've noticed that other town meetings do have a chat option, a chat feature, but the chat feature doesn't seem to be enabled in our meetings.
Yes, we stopped enabling the chat feature. It's not a requirement, but we did stop enabling it because despite what we'd say, that when we're busy deliberating on things, I never have time to look at the chat, ever. So we're not considering that. And I think most of the board is not reviewing that. And yet people are entering things, and then we're getting frustrated that we weren't incorporating that information into the discussion. It's also contrary to what a public meeting is about, because I attended many, many, many years of meetings in person, and frankly, there wasn't a lot of discussion going on because that was disruptive to the public meeting and everyone who was present being able to hear. They couldn't have someone having a conversation next to them while they're trying to listen to the meeting overall. So that kind of discussion did not take place very much at in-person meetings, so there really wasn't that dynamic. Maybe people could write notes to one another. That was possible, or occasionally whisper a word or two, but nothing substantive was going on. So that wasn't really part of the in-person meeting, or was disruptive when it was part of it. And what we'd prefer is that if people have something to say, raise your hand. And I've always welcomed people adding comments to a topic that we're discussing. We can't go off agenda, but if we're talking about something, we do invite and welcome public input on that. So but I agree, it's done differently. And in some places where it's, I've certainly been in meetings where it has been helpful to be having links, but that's a different kind of informational, where you are trying to reach out to the participants with tools that they can use. I think of it more as educational webinars, not what we're doing. I don't know how that,
Um,
if that sounds reasonable to you or whatever, but.
I agree, Daryl, in that it would not be possible for a board member to monitor the chat. Like we're talking. I'm not opposed to the idea of opening up the chat, but there would have to be a disclosure that it will not be monitored and it's not part of the public record. And I think that's important that people would need to know that going forward.
I mean, we could try it again. It's just that despite saying that, it still seemed to lead to some.
Why was it discontinued?
Because
Did we
people
vote
were
on that?
putting, what?
Oh, I was just wondering if the board discussed it. I don't remember discussing
Yes,
it.
we did discuss it.
Was it at an open meeting?
Yes. And then often early on, before it became more of a habit that I would remember to turn it off, but someone would point out if I hadn't, that I hadn't yet turned off the chat. So yes, early on we did discuss it, and it was the outgrowth of, as I said, people being dismayed that we weren't addressing their comments. And also that it was just a side discussion that was going on, and really if people have things that they want to share, rather than type it in a chat, just share it with everyone verbally in the spirit of what the public meeting is about. So in a way, the Board of Health was being excluded from conversations that the public was having, presumably on what we were discussing. And that is not, that I have to say, I feel pretty strongly that that's not.
But we weren't really, I mean, sometimes the public wasn't recognized. And so it's possible that there might be some value to that.
Doug, I'm going to recognize you. We try to have the board discussion because sometimes it might answer somebody's comment or question. So I think I have been accused of accepting more public comment than many others in town would consider reasonable. So I have never stood in the way, and I don't think our board has stood in the way of public comment. So I don't think that the chat is essential as a way for people to make the comments. And then if it's important that their comments are heard by us, we are not hearing it, because it doesn't preserve the chat. We're not hearing those comments in real time as we're deliberating something. So I'm not sure what the purpose is in the context of a public meeting. Okay, Doug?
Well, I'll just jump in and comment on the chat since that's where you are in your conversation. The purpose of the chat is not to necessarily address the board. We can address the board simply by raising our hand on Zoom. Purpose of the chat is to be able to talk to each other. If we were having a meeting in the town hall and there were folding chairs with 20 people in the room, I could lean over and talk to the person next to me without disrupting the meeting. You're basically precluding people in town from talking to each other. Let me back way up. I strongly object to the use of Zoom meetings at all for this committee. I understand that the Zoom meetings are allowed by a temporary state order, which has to be renewed due to COVID, but we're well beyond the pandemic. There's no public health reason to meet remotely. I also acknowledge what everyone has said tonight, that Zoom meetings are convenient for people, but the role of public officials is not to avoid a 10-minute drive to town hall or be comfortable at home in your slippers. It's to stand before the public and be fully transparent. Zoom meetings fundamentally discriminate against, it's been mentioned, the elderly, people who can't afford a computer, people who aren't good with technology, people without good Wi-Fi. I mean, Daryl, you said we all know each other well enough. I don't know you at all. I've never met you and I've never seen you on Zoom because apparently you don't have the technology to put your face in these meetings. I mean, I don't know what the issue is, but I see a picture of a fern. That's it. Zoom meetings preclude the opportunity for us to have face-to-face human interaction, which is the basis of building relationships and trust among a group of concerned citizens. I would point out that the United States Congress doesn't allow Zoom meetings for committee meetings. I checked this out with our state rep, our congressional rep. I mean, if someone has a genuine health issue or can't travel, you can have a hybrid meeting. Everybody knows that. I mean, the last Board of Health meeting, virtually everybody was off camera. And all of us were unable to talk to each other because you won't allow the chat feature. So I'll just end by asking a question of the board. Are there any conditions under which you would change back to in-person meetings as you had operated forever before March 2020?
I think consider it. That's my personal opinion, intermittently. Because we're elected to serve the public, and I think we should serve the public, not just our own interests.
Rebecca, I don't think that holding the meeting virtually is preventing us from serving the public. Everything that is on an agenda is addressed. I don't see how we are not serving the public.
And the difference in participation with Zoom versus in-person meetings is big.
How do you know?
Very big difference.
How do you know? How do you know?
Because I've been on the board for quite a long time. And,
how long?
I think 15 years. I've lost track.
Prior to
different. Maybe the increased participation is because there's more town-wide business in front of the board.
No, we get more people. We've always had some issues that were larger. It's very different.
Cheryl, we have other public comment. We should respect their time and take comments.
Okay, Michael.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for hearing me out. First of all, I want to say I think this is a really healthy conversation. I'm glad that it's being surfaced. I actually would say in support of Mr. Kingsley's assertion that the chat feature be enabled. I think I support the point, actually, in spite of disagreeing with the premise of which he's arguing for it, which is that, when we sit at a public meeting, you might be able to lean over and talk to somebody who's sitting next to you. But I think I recall in a previous meeting, was, well, I'd like to be able to ask, somebody who's presenting something. You can do that on Zoom. You can't do that in a public meeting. You can do it after the fact. You can't do it in a public meeting. You can talk to somebody who's next to you. I think the chat feature is certainly relevant for better engagement, better understanding of side conversations. And I understand the board's concern about it not being a matter of public record, but I don't think that's necessarily the feature that needs to serve. But I would strongly encourage the continuation of virtual meetings, as even just most recently, I because of the nature of some of the issues that have arisen that have been more relevant to our family in terms of development in town, I've participated in countless ZBA Board of Health meetings over the course of the last several months at almost a weekly, sometimes multiple weekly clip. And the ability to participate in those has been, because they have been virtual, I think as a result, you've seen much higher participation. I want to echo Ms. Beardsley's point on that. As evidenced just by town meeting, which is not virtual, had about 150 to 200 people voting in them, and we've had 50 people at ZBA meetings or 50 people at Board of Health meetings, when we are only getting barely a couple hundred votes at town meeting, which should be the essence of our town participation. So I am a big believer that virtual meetings allow more democracy to happen, more engagement to happen. I don't think, Mr. Kingsley, I think your point on, maybe some guidelines around on-camera participation, and certainly on chat, I fully support that. But I think that the enablement of participation in these meetings by a large swath of the community in a largely just citizen-run government is really important. And I guess the last thing I would say just is that I again am relatively new to how involved I've been over the last few months as a result of some of the things that have been going on in town. But I would say that I've come to have a strong appreciation for the time and effort and dedication of our citizens in terms of the roles that they play in a largely voluntary practice out of service to the community. And I want the best people serving on our committees in town. And I want to make sure that it is not just those who have the ability to show up, potentially once a week or more in town and give hours and hours of their time, but they can actually schedule a meeting in the middle of the day and do that virtually and participate in these meetings in the evenings. And that we're going to get the best quality people on these really important committees participating as a result of the fact that it's more possible for them to participate today than it would have been 5 or 6 years ago. So I certainly respect some of the critiques, Mr. Kingsley, you have of this. But I, in terms of being focused on democracy and ultimately participation and getting the most people involved in this as possible, I think this is and I think the contrast of town meeting versus these virtual meetings that we've had is the best example of how that is actually playing out in our town. So,
can I respond since some of those were addressed to me?
Yeah,
I'd like to go through
something that I said, because I think that you might be misunderstanding what I'm saying too, because I wasn't talking about in person without remote access. I was talking about hybrid. So you would always have access remote, but just that we, the board, be in a room together periodically so that people who don't have the ability to do the technology can once a month or once a quarter or something meet us in person. That's all I was proposing.
Can I just ask, when you say about don't have access to the technology, do you consider a phone call and a significant technological obstacle?
Are you talking to me?
Yes.
No, I think the state wants us to have access for people of all different methods, but all I was saying is that it might have a value to have us meet periodically in person where somebody can come to the room, and at the same time people can call in, they can Zoom in. I mean, doesn't the zoning board do that? Doesn't the Board of Selectmen do that also, where there's some meetings where people meet in the room and then there's remote access, all different types of access. But that has to be recorded. That's all.
That was mentioned earlier, but we also mentioned that sometimes there are technical difficulties that lead to cancellation of meetings. That just happened recently. And that would be very hard for us because we have timelines with which we need to
Does the town hall not have a
variance
speakerphone?
requests. Who's speaking now?
Does the town hall
No.
not
Hold on. This is a discussion. You need to raise your hand. I'm sorry, just to keep it organized. Among the board, we'll go back and forth between ourselves without necessarily raising hands, but it does help just with the flow of things. So we'll get to you in a moment. So anyway, that was my question, Rebecca, just about the phone, whether it's an obstacle, and then I've been involved with remote meetings and hybrid meetings for probably easily 15 years. I've done thousands of these. And the hybrids have been problematic throughout. They're getting better, but it's always created a different level of participation for those who are present and those who are remote when you're mixing the two technologies. So at some point that might be better. And I also some other issues with it. But in any case, all right. So Meredith, you're next up.
I just wanted to say something along the same lines. I've been teaching online. It's sort of one of my specialties since 2001. And, you know, certainly online teaching and face-to-face teaching, just like these meetings, they have different qualities. I think that what's at issue is how the meeting itself, I guess the types of control that are paired with face-to-face versus online meetings. I think that's kind of the crux of the issue for the parties who are concerned with the online meetings. And I don't know that there is an easy way to sort that out, because in both types of meetings, certainly ones that I've had related to Dover Sherborn and just outside of Dover Sherborn type meetings, in both cases, you can have situations where public comments are not heard, or I've always found that, I mean, I'm more likely to talk in certainly the ZBA and the BOH meetings as they're held online. I don't know that there is going to be a golden, a golden format. Certainly also hybrid is also difficult because the people who are running the meeting are going to, just by human nature, have a greater, focus on the format that they are dealing with themselves. So if they are there in person, they're going to give primary, focus to the in-person people, and the online people get ignored, and vice versa. If you're online and then there's a room full of people who are, coming in, from that room to an online meeting, then they tend to be focused on less, and there really is no middle, no happy middle. I mean, it just seems like, in my experience, you have to kind of do one or the other. But I do like Julie's idea of providing people with training if they're not able, or maybe even, I don't know. I mean, if a meeting were to happen during library hours, even having staff help people log in so they could have, they could get the help at that time. I just don't see that there is going to be a single answer that's going to work for everyone. For instance, for me, I fed my son at 6:50. I gave him a bath within 5 minutes, fastest bath I'd ever given him. I logged on in. I took a little break at close to 7:30 to log my sister into, I mean, not my daughter into Spanish class. Her teacher is in Guatemala, by the way, and then come on back and participate. And this is sort of what a parent sort of does these days, and the Zoom meetings are just such a benefit to so many of us. I don't know if that helps, but that's my experience.
Thank you. Doug?
Yes. Well, this is a hybrid meeting. I mean, Daryl, you're on a phone. I mean, this idea.
I'm also looking at the screen. I don't know why it's important to look at me, but my internet connection is, whatever the wires are leading to our house, is beyond my control. It doesn't always do well, and it slows things down. So for quality of the communications, I am not on screen. But if that's of critical importance, I will try it now, and we'll see how that works.
You're making one of my points, which is the technology is not always reliable. A question I would have.
No, it's my individual circumstance that has worked in the past, is not working now, and so I'm working.
But this is
working around. But I'm what?
Can I make a point? My point is that there are 4,700 people in town. Not everybody has good internet. Not everybody has good Wi-Fi. Everybody might have an individual circumstance that keeps them from using this efficiently. If the objection is you can't have an in-person meeting with someone on the phone, I would ask a simple question. Does the town of Sherborn not have a speaker phone in the conference room? That's a serious question. Like, people can't call in on the phone?
Doug,
yes, we've done that in the past, and it's been miserable in terms of quality.
Yeah,
They have a new system now, but there are other issues. And again, the phone question, I am using a phone to get better audio and to not text. I don't want to go into my individual temporary technical issues at the moment because they're complicated
So let me
and it's
respond
not
to
really germane to this.
Let me respond to the issue of chat. Okay, other boards, the ZBA, for example, allows chat. There's no reason why the chat has to be a matter of public record. The chat is literally people in the room talking to each other. It doesn't have to be addressed to the board, and the board doesn't need to know what I'm saying to the guy sitting next to me if we were in a room. It's ridiculous.
Can I just ask you,
the last
what is
meeting 2
the
weeks
spirit?
ago. Go ahead.
When you go to in-person meetings, are you having extensive discussions with other people?
Look, I'll give you the perfect example. Last week, the topic doesn't matter. The last week, there was a topic discussed. Someone was presenting. That person who was presenting was kind of getting, I'll just say, grilled by the board, questions back and forth. And I was going to chat with the person and make a suggestion about how that person might answer the questions or present the problem in a different light. I was precluded from doing that because you're not letting us talk to each other.
And how, being in person, would you have walked across the room to do that, to find the person?
Of course I would have, or I could have slipped him a note. Hey, mention this. You're basically, this is a control issue, Daryl. You were precluding people in town from talking to each other or getting to know each other. Forget about it. I get it.
Right.
You people are never going to have an in-person meeting. I get it. I've lost the battle. But it's disgraceful that you don't allow chat. Other boards allow chat. It's totally just you wanting to have control of what people are doing or saying. It's ridiculous. It's undemocratic. It's non-transparent.
I don't agree with that, but let's pause.
And why does the ZBA do
the board? Excuse me, I'm asking the board a question. Just a moment. Can you wait? Back to this is a board discussion at the moment. How does the rest of the board feel about turning on the chat? If we caveat, I'm okay with it if we caveat it repeatedly. Again, I don't think it's in the spirit of what a public meeting is supposed to be about. Transparency is what you're asking for, Doug. I don't see it as meeting that, but anyway, I would like to hear from the board. Hold on, still board.
So I'll go first. I don't think that you need the chat for transparency. However, I do think there is value for citizens to be able to communicate between each other. I still maintain that it's not something that the board can monitor, and nor would it be part of the public record because it's simply not recorded in the recording. I mean, it's that simple. But I would be open to turning on the chat. And I think as long as we don't have any unforeseen hiccups where, I mean, people are abusive to each other or something that would be completely inappropriate, then I think that would be perfectly fine. That's my take.
And I agree with that, Daryl. I also think that it would be challenging. In my daytime job, we do meetings hybrid, and it is very challenging unless someone is monitoring the chat. People get missed, but people can raise their hand and speak, as well as put comments. And yeah, it does add another element to the meeting. So we would need to remind people that, yeah, it isn't part of the public recording, that their comment could be missed, that they should raise their hand, but they could communicate with each other should they choose to do that.
I also agree. I think that there's a value to it. I don't know. I'd be interested to know in the legal perspective of open meeting law, and I thought it was interesting, a point that this citizen made. When I used to attend meetings in person, which of course for 27 years, we only had in-person meetings since I've lived in the town. At those meetings, I would learn who, I would meet people who had intelligent comments or interesting statements. And I sometimes learned new information, and at the meeting or after the meeting ended, I could go and talk to the individual and find out more information. So I thought that was valuable. I don't know whether the chat would enable that sort of communication, but I do think that that is something, another perspective, which might have some value. As I said before, I personally think that there might be a value to us going to a place, you know, periodically or some point and having an open meeting, a true old-fashioned open meeting with remote access to it, with Dover Sherborn cable TV helping or whatever. Just because I do think that there are some people in town who would probably appreciate it, but that is, you know, and I don't think any of the arguments about the benefits of remote meetings really are relevant to the conversation, because those are never going to be, we're never going to exclude remote access. We're always going to have that. So, but I think that the issue is whether there's a value of going in person to one place at some point, and with remote access. And I don't know. So thank you for discussing it.
Okay, so I have activated the chat. Excuse me, who was talking?
Sarah, I just am going to re-enter the meeting so that I can screen share my device. My battery charger is not functioning, so I will be right back.
Okay. Okay. All right, in the meantime, I'll mention I have reactivated the chat as of now. Previous board decided not to have chat. The current board, we are endorsing the chat, is the impression I have. I don't think this needs a vote, didn't have a formal vote in the past. So I'll leave the chat on in the future, and I ask the board that you help with reminding or even just interjecting at the meetings to remind participants that it is not monitored, it is not recorded. If they have an important point that they'd like to make, that they'd like the board to be aware of and consider, then that's going to have to be made by raising somebody's hand and stating it. Does that sound reasonable?
Yep, sounds good, Daryl.
Okay.
Doug, do you have another question?
No, I simply want to say thank you for doing that. And I would suggest, if it's a concern of yours, Daryl, I don't think the chat should be monitored. The point is, if you have a business in front of the board, you should raise your hand and be recognized. You wouldn't put up with someone just shouting into the room if we were all in person. But the chat among people in the room, which is no different than leaning over and talking to your neighbor quietly without interrupting the meeting or handing them a note, absolutely should not be monitored or recorded, because those are private conversations. I mean, this way, if with the chat is on, if someone's here before the board with business and, for example, has their attorney, in front of the board or a consultant, they can talk to them during the meeting as they would in public, in a room. But without the chat, you can't do that. So I appreciate you turning the chat on.
Okay. All right.
Daryl, we still have the chair's business, and we have
yes, we do.
the temporary food, and we also have the farm pond, the beach permit, and the water test review.
Yes, and the food permits. So okay.
Yeah.
And the agenda. All right. So I think we have a lot that we can think about. Comments about in-person, hybrid, and Zoom meetings to think about, and I suggest we just revisit this again in the future. Just for general sense of the board, I think that I will say I enjoyed in-person meetings. However, I think that we do get better participation, and convenience is an issue, or time saving, or even reduced energy use for the travel. Reduced pollution resulting from that are all benefits that I think are worthwhile. And we do have to spend a lot of time on the matters before the Board of Health. And so time saved by not traveling back and forth is more time to spend on the research and the background work that we do outside of these meetings. So for that, I enjoy it, and I do think it's a big advantage to all of the agents who are acting on behalf of the applicants to be able to participate. They have really appreciated this manner of having meetings. So maybe if we had a meeting that never had anyone else who needed to come on behalf of an applicant, perhaps that would be an opportunity to meet in person, but I'm not sure that, again, because the members of the board know each other well enough that I don't know that we're missing out on a dynamic by not being in person. In any case, all right, so does anyone have any last comments that they want to share on this before we move on? Okay, all right. Let's see, why don't we take a little break and do some of the easier things that are also time sensitive. So we have the Sweet Meadow Farm. I'm looking at other business. Sweet Meadow Farm recreational camp permit. And I spoke with the food camp inspector earlier today, who said that there are still a number of items that need to be addressed. The camp is not opening immediately. Among the things to be done, besides some paperwork for camp inspectors looking for, there are also building and fire inspections that need to take place. However, we can conditionally approve the permit contingent on the camp passing the food inspector's inspection and completing the building and fire inspection, which would be rolled up under the food and camp inspector's review of their status. Because it wouldn't pass inspection unless it had already passed the building and fire. So would anyone like to make a motion to approve this permit contingent on passing the camp inspection?
So moved.
Seconded.
Any other comments? Hearing none.
Julie Dreyfus, aye.
Diana Hook, aye.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
And Daryl Beardsley, aye. And then also for the Sweet Meadow Farm, they have a seasonal food permit that's often for events that they might have for the children who are attending the camp. They do not prepare food on site. They might bring in pizza and then have sanitary processes for distributing the food to the children. They also have a mechanical portable hand sink that has hot water. They also have portable units. I should mention that this farm does not have a water supply and it does not have a septic system. They don't have an on-site well, so that's why they have to bring in water. And that's also why they need to have portable toilet arrangements. There are hand washing sinks associated with the portable toilet units that they've brought in, but they don't have hot water associated with them yet. So that might be an improvement that they can make. They would need to add some equipment or modify what they're using. in any case, they do have what they need, certainly with the portable hand washing sink at the moment. Therefore, the food and camp inspector has recommended approval for this. And so does anyone want to make a motion to approve the seasonal food permit, Sweet Meadow?
So moved.
Seconded.
Any other discussion? Hearing none?
Julie Dreyfus, aye.
Diana Hook, aye.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
Darrell Beardsley, aye. And let's see, Dow's Orchards is looking for their seasonal food permit for the upcoming season. With what they submitted, they do have a manganese level that is above secondary standard, which is not mandatory but is recommended. And Mark, have you had a chance to look at this at all or talk to food inspector about this?
No, I have not. Actually, Tom and I were not able to connect today, but manganese, as you said, is more of a nuisance mineral. It will cause staining to the fixtures and can cause an off taste to the water. But I would recommend that if they decide to filter for the manganese, that they not use a sodium filter, because then they're just increasing the sodium level. That would be my recommendation.
Okay. I do think we should have some outreach because the manganese, if they're drinking the water, can be a health issue. And so they may want to retest just to verify that that last result was representative of what the water is.
Excuse me.
Excuse me? Yes,
when you
ahead.
have a minute, I would like to ask a question.
Okay.
Are we
why
talking
don't you
about
do that now?
Okay, are we talking about a public faucet at the farm, or are we talking about their personal home?
It is in the farm stand. So there is an issue that they are using it for washing, and it may be associated with their apple cider.
Because how high is the level? And because you said it's it's in the secondary threshold.
So I think the
Do we have that,
lab
Darren?
test results are farther down in the document. I think it might be the last page or next to last.
Because it is true that if there's, it's not aerosolized, but that wouldn't be an issue because they're not showering. But it is true that enough manganese exposure is cumulative, and there can be neurotoxicity if it's high enough, and that's irreversible. It's not. There's no treatment for it, so that would be important.
So it looks like it's 0.118.
Yes.
So it's significantly higher than the SMCL. I think the difference here is this is not, a school or a home. This is a washing stand in a farm stand. I don't know if they're using it for the cider. I think we should absolutely clarify that. And just yeah.
I suggest they filter and test after the filter to make sure they're within the standard that's recommended for secondary drinking water.
Yeah.
Okay, so.
And their sodium is also high, but.
That's very common on on any major roads that wells are close by that have been through the years treated with salt for winter drivability.
Okay, so all right, we have the certainly the sodium posting issue, and well, except so Mark, how does the sodium posting work? Or Jessica, you may know this too. If they're not actually serving anything with their water in it, but is there still the requirement to post? I believe also for the employees that posting is important, not just for the general public. So I believe sodium posting should.
I think it would be beneficial to clarify whether that wash stand is being used just for the cider or for hand washing, because if they're having alternative hand wash methods brought in, as per my understanding, they're the portable hand wash sinks, then it would, as per the food code, they would need to have access to hot water. But if this is isolated, only serving the cider as a wash station, then the sodium and the current manganese levels would not be impacting food service for this event.
Okay, so I don't know when they want to open their stand. I know it's around now, so this might really need to be addressed before the next meeting. So what do you think about an approval for this conditional to the food inspector confirming with them the uses of the water, and then education about or information about possible retesting for them to know and to understand about the level, because this report, I mean, we don't know. It does make clear that it's above the recommended limit, which again is not a firm requirement in Massachusetts, because it's considered a secondary contaminant, despite that it does indeed have health effects that have been proven. So something along the lines of that sort of conditioning, and then also requiring the sodium posting. We could clean that up, but does anyone have comments about approval with those conditions?
I think for me, Daryl, I just want to know if I want to make sure that the water is not going into the cider like in volume. If this is just a wash station where there's really no water going in, then I think it's less of an issue with the manganese. But we should let them know too, because it's, you know,
Except they might want to know if it's endangering their own drinking water.
But I don't.
And that's why I had that as the educational, informational portion. And I'm sure Tom and I discussed this, and he is interested in all these things and letting them know what their options are for their own protection. Okay, so how about do we have a motion to approve the seasonal food permit for Dow's Orchards, conditional to sodium posting, confirmation of how the water containing the manganese is used, and
maybe they should also
post
manganese.
Excuse me?
I said maybe they should also post the manganese.
I don't think we've done that before.
No, we haven't. It's not a written requirement. So the last thing is then, how would we phrase it? Educational outreach to the owners, operators of Dow's Orchard about health issues and testing issues. And Mark, you were also mentioning treatment issues around managing the manganese.
I think that all wraps into education, Daryl. I mean, just so that the motion is not 5 pages.
Okay. All right. So we're the first two, and then the third one, rather than informational outreach, would just be education to the owner-operator about the manganese situation.
You said confirmation of water use?
Earlier was confirmation, yes. First was sodium posting, second was confirmation of use of the water containing the manganese, and the third would be the educational.
Okay. So moved.
Seconded.
Any further discussion? Hearing none.
Julie Dreyfus, aye.
Diana Hook, aye.
Rebecca Honeywell, I was going to make a comment. Maybe when we're done, I'll make it if I can.
And Daryl Beardsley, aye. So
I was-
Diana, I know in the past that you've mentioned about the importance of manganese in our diet.
Some vitamin supplements do have it.
Yes.
The Douses don't need it if they're, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, Rebecca?
I could do some research on this because I think it would be valuable. It's definitely true that people take manganese as a supplement. And there are definitely some safe thresholds of consumption. So I would be willing to try to look into it as far as where it's safe and what would the risks be for the homeowners, because it could come up again in town.
Yes, and probably years ago, in the mid-2000s, early 2000s, the board had researched manganese because it was showing up in wells, in Holliston's wells at significant levels. And at the time, there was some project that was going in over near where the aquifer from which Holliston was drawing from. So we were looking at manganese, and at higher levels, there were issues of effects, Parkinson-like effects, referred to as manganism. And there was also evidence that inhaling manganese was more dangerous. So, for example, if it was in the water droplets in the shower, that inhaling that would have a greater impact than ingesting manganese. So different uses have different impacts, is the message there. Okay. We also have, let's see, a temporary food permit for TC Scoops, and Tom recommends approval pending an inspection. So do we have a motion to authorize Tom or authorize the food inspector to approve this temporary food permit for TC Scoops, conditional to passing a satisfactory inspection?
So moved.
Seconded.
Any other comments? Hearing none.
Julie Dreyfus, aye.
Diana Hook, aye.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
Daryl Beardsley, aye. Now we have things that were anticipated less than 48 hours in advance. Do we have a motion to approve the temporary food permit for Nirvana Tea House and for Not Mama's Vegan Cafe, both of which are going to be at the Dudley Fest at the Unity Farm?
Are they pending inspection, Daryl?
No.
So moved.
Seconded.
Okay, any other comment? Hearing none.
Julie Dreyfus, aye.
Diana Hook, aye.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
Daryl Beardsley, aye. And let's see. All right, and then there was an application for a food permit, temporary food permit. This is for Pharmapalooza, perhaps, something at Silverwood that's coming up. And of course, I think it's before our next meeting. So this would be an issue where Tom has yet to complete inspection. So do we have a motion to authorize the food inspector to approve the permit contingent on passing inspection satisfactorily.
So moved.
Seconded.
Any other comments? Hearing none.
Julie Dreyfus, aye.
Diana Hook, aye.
Becca Honeywell, aye.
Daryl Beardsley, aye. All right. Let's see, farm pond water. Mark, would you like to?
Sure. We received today, last night, a rush order. It came onto my desk this morning, the lab results for the first water test taken. And it's only for the pond, so it's not for the drinking water down there at this point. And the E. coli was less than 5. The standard is they not exceed 235 E. coli colonies. And I went down today to do the inspection of the facilities and did explain that the water for drinking has not been passed yet to cover over the drinking fountain, which they've done in the past. And they have the central bathroom open at this time, and they're planning to clean out the other 2 bathrooms. But in the meantime, they'll have the handicap bathroom in the center of their building, as well as the porta toilet to the side of that building. The water clarity looked very good. The water temperature when they checked it on Monday was 55 degrees centigrade. I mean, Fahrenheit. I do believe it's warmer because I put my hand in it, and at least at the shore, it was warmer and to feel. But as I was talking to the beach director today, I said, you know, as the water temperature goes up, we may definitely see different results, and we'll be keeping an eye on the weekly tests that they do down there. But I would recommend that the permit for the beach use be approved without use of the drinking water until tested and approved.
Okay, does anyone have any questions or comments? Okay, so do we have a motion to approve the beach permit subject to water test, the drinking water test results? Mark, does that cover it?
Yeah, right now the pond water has passed the state requirements, and that they not use the drinking water fountain that's there until that water is tested for drinking potability.
Okay, so the motion would be then conditioned, as Mark has just indicated, is more about not using the water until it has
Correct.
been proven potable.
Yes.
Okay.
No. So moved.
Seconded.
Okay, and Rebecca, do you have a comment?
I had a question. Yeah, I mean, we were sort of in the middle
Yep,
of a
go
vote.
ahead.
We're done.
No,
My
it's
question
actually
is-
standard, just so you know, it's standard to move something and then discuss it. So
Okay.
often we're formulating what we're going to make a motion on, but that's why I always ask if there are any further comments before we take a vote. So go ahead.
Okay, thank you. My question is, I'm not on the Farm Pond Committee. Does the Farm Pond Committee have a routine testing schedule throughout the season, or just at the beginning when we give them the permit?
Mark, would you like to answer that? We do talk about this.
Yeah, I'm not for sure. I know I saw Tom Trainer add something to the chat, so he might be here that he could answer that. But as required by the state, they're not required to submit those tests, but they may be doing additional tests above and beyond what's required to run the beach. Daryl, I don't know if Tom's still here, and if he knows the answer, he might be able to help us.
All right,
Yeah.
before Tom, if he wants to weigh in, but Rebecca, are you asking about general testing or about beach testing specifically? There's
Well,
water
I guess
quality testing that's required and goes on throughout the year. You recall in past summers, we've occasionally had times where the average of, a series of test results, if it passes a certain level, we have to shut down the beach. And that has rarely happened, but occasionally it does.
Yeah.
Usually in goose season.
Right. In the recent past, there were a couple cases or consists of the blue-green algae, and I knew about that. I was just curious, in the wake of that recent incident, is this the kind of thing that is being tested on a schedule, or just when there is a concern? I was just curious. I know that we've discussed this in the past, but I'm just not familiar with what their normal procedure is.
Okay, I don't know if Tom wants to speak, but until he raises his hand, I'll take that. So it's complicated and expensive and time-consuming to take the tests because they have to be delivered to labs and they're not nearby. So the first line of defense on the algae blooms is visual. And so the Farm Pond Advisory Committee, especially Tom, have trained the staff at the Sherborn Yacht Club and others on how to gather samples, use microscopes to evaluate, like as a first cut, what's present, to notice conditions in the pond, and then report them to the Farm Pond Advisory Committee so that then they can decide if it's reached the level of needing to send off samples to a lab. So that's pretty much what's been done as opposed to routine, just grabbing a sample, every week on a time basis. It's an observation based, except for some of the other testing that they do for water quality, which is Secchi disc or Secchi disc, I'm not sure how they pronounce it. For water clarity, those are routine tests that are done. Not sure what else they might do that's routine. So he would be better to answer that. Also, for the algae blooms, they can often be, here's Tom, they can often be very location specific. So that's the other thing, is they're looking for where they can have the chance to have a dense enough sample of something, which is also unfortunate if it's dense, but to then be able to detect what you're looking for. Tom? I'm sure
yeah, Daryl, if you want.
Fill in all the gaps I left.
Well, you're covering multiple topics, and
Yeah.
I don't have a great connection, and a minute ago was pretty poor, so I might have missed something. But to answer, I think Rebecca's one of the original questions, the Farm Pond Committee and the volunteers have no involvement in the state regulated testing of a public beach. So what Mark was talking about, the E. coli, we have no involvement in that. So that's the town that does it weekly throughout the public open times of the beach. But separately, we do a lot of the water quality testing all over the pond, including things like Secchi disc transparency and dissolved oxygen and temperature profiles and cyanobacteria screening. But all of that is done separately. And actually, right now, we luckily have a 2-year stint with a professional consultant that actually is doing all that routine work for us last year and now this year.
Oh, that's great. So the volunteer committee does the weekly testing throughout the season, but what we're talking about now is the state mandated testing, which is what we've been involved with in the past for every year, but only at the time of the permit. Beach permit.
Okay, but you did ask about the 18.
Yeah, I did. Of course. Yeah, no. I appreciate that. Thank you so much, because that was what I was wondering. I wasn't sure who managed it. Thank you.
Excuse me, could I add something as well?
Yeah.
So Rebecca, also to elaborate on your question, 105 CMR 445 is the state sanitary code regarding minimum standards for bathing beaches. So you might find that to be very informative.
Thank you.
It discusses the use acceptable standards of the bathing water and how to establish the procedure for informing the public of any closures.
And I'll also mention that it's the reservation group who collects the beach water samples and then provides those results to the Board of Health. And I don't know who specifically in the town is collecting the samples. Do you know, Mark? Not that it matters.
As it relates to the beach, it's the GNL Laboratories takes the sampling. As it
okay.
relates to the cyanobacteria or anything that is an issue, usually the Farm Pond Committee and the Board of Health get involved with that.
Yes. And we did have did take tests, and did the state come out, Tom? If you're still here? I can't remember if they actually sent someone to collect the samples.
2 years ago, we had that really bad year
Yeah.
when things really went to pot. We did get the state to do some visual observations. They actually didn't take a test.
Oh, okay. They didn't do that. Okay. So it's always been the town. Okay. That's what I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
All right.
So was the vote taken?
So are we ready to vote on the motion? I don't want to forget to do that. Are we, any other comments about the permit for the beach? Okay. So hearing none?
Julie Dreyfus, aye.
Diana Hook, aye.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
Darrell Beardsley, aye. Okay, I think we covered all the additions. Okay. All right. So, Farm Road Homes. There has been no new information. Although we did receive an email last week from the applicant saying that they believe that peer reviewer was going to be issuing comments before this meeting tonight for our review. So we didn't have that, but I did want to go over what we submitted to the ZBA, because after the last meeting that they held that we attended, they asked us to put things in writing. So Mark and I pulled together some of the technical issues specific to the septic system to share with them in the interim. So this is posted on the land development webpage. You haven't had a chance to see it, but we could go through it briefly. So the first issue we note is that the Septitech Star 13.5 system had not yet been approved by Mass DEP. Just after we wrote this, literally hours after we wrote this, we received word from Mass DEP that the approval had been issued. So this is somewhat obsolete, and now we can move on to the issue of what do we want to comment about the system itself, because there are a lot of conditions associated with it, and we can go back and review that depending on it's getting late, but or we can have it for the next meeting. But there are a number of things within the conditional use. Certainly the maximum for purposes of any kind of nitrogen loading analyses that might be done, maximum that they can, or minimum that they can assume, is 25 parts per million, not 19, which is what's been used in prior analyses. And there are also requirements for ongoing testing, and there needs to be an understanding by the owners and operators of the system, which may be appreciated by the developer, but for the future owners, they would need to know that if the system which is provisional use because its performance is not validated across different applications and over time yet in Massachusetts. And that's what this approval is about, is really to allow the state to have intensive monitoring of the performance so it can track whether it can eventually move to general use approval, which means that its performance is more reliable. It's not in that stage yet. So with that lack of proven reliability, if it does not perform as expected, owners of the system would have to replace it with something future, in the relatively near future, not at the end of its functional life, but if it's not performing. And that's a big deal for certainly the future owners if they're not aware that that could be what they're inheriting. One of the issues I see as concerning for this is that the most intensive monitoring period is a monthly monitoring program of various effluent quality parameters for the first 3 years. I checked with DEP, and that 3 years does not start once the system is being used at 100% of operation, but it starts from when it goes in and any kind of use begins. So if it takes a number of years to build out the system, I could believe it could even potentially take 3 years to even hit 100% use. So then the question becomes, the local approving authority might be able to condition that to extend it, but I just feel that the 3-year period might not really demonstrate the performance of the system at that 3-year point. Okay, so that's, but maybe we'll have it where know if this approval has been posted on the website, but can certainly send around a copy of the provisional use approval that DEP just issued, or I could share my screen and show you some sections of it. Okay, so I guess we could move on to the next point, unless anyone else has any questions or comments about septic tech. Okay.
I'll also say, Daryl, I completely agree with you in terms of the inspection, operation, and maintenance, kind of for the life of the system. I don't feel like I know the clear answer to how that is going to work in the project's design. And I am concerned about the phasing of the build out and how, if in the build out process, if there's an issue with the system, is the ownership structure clear? And it's in the provisional use, it's obvious that that has to be the case. And I would just appreciate better clarification from the developer on that.
Yes, just the administration and of the ownership and responsibility and how that gets transferred over and when, and how there is an obligation to have deed recordings that would notify new owners. But again, we see that we're certainly able to purchase homes in towns, and not clear that whatever agents, legal agents they might be using, have done complete due diligence on deed recordings for properties. I think something a little stronger or reinforcing that transmittal of information might be something to recommend. Okay, so this next one about the nitrogen loading. Again, in the analyses that they had done thus far about nitrogen loading, they were using an assumption of a 19 milligram per liter concentration of nitrogen compounds. In the effluent, they will have to use 25. That's just going to shift that. Okay. Talked about the monitoring. Okay, I think we can go to point 4. Okay. Mark, do you want to talk a little bit about
Sure.
this complexity since you were present at the meeting where the sieve analyses was even recommended?
I was at this back on December 20th, where I was sitting down with Deschang and Peter Dillon and myself at a meeting prior to our second meeting on April 29th. So at the December 20th meeting, the review was going over Horsley's report, and Peter Dillon had noted it would be important to do a sieve analysis to respond to the hydraulic loading. There was no mention utilize this as it relates to determining the final soil type out there. And there's been discussion amongst the board and relayed to the developer and engineer that, in my belief, this is a class 2 soil when you look at the conservative side of it, which would increase the size of the septic system. But the approach within all Title V past reviews was you always take the conservative approach. But at the meeting on April 29th, Peter said, no, he meant this to be for both. Whatever the case is, when I had the meeting on April 29th, we had Peter Dillon from Tetra Tech, Deschang Wang, we had Jeremy Marisette, our town administrator, as well as Bob Murchison. And unfortunately, Peter didn't say that he said it was just for the determination for the hydraulic loading. With that said, it still was questioned because one, they had dug the test holes to grab the soil samples prior to my arrival, and the depth of the soil, the depth of the holes, in my view, was 5 to 5.5 feet. Seeing Deschang go down to get a sample, and there's no control on the sample taken, but at that April 29th meeting, there was discussion on, well, maybe doing a borehole would help to resolve this issue. And the answer back from the developer was absolutely not. They're not interested, as we suggested even in letters, that they go back out and do a test hole where the septic tanks are, and they're not interested in doing one in the center of the system. Although, when we were on another site on Washington Street with the same developer, and I suggested one in the center of the system area, they went ahead and did it. And again, it's just, there's some issues with them shying away from this. I think the evidence is right in the ground, but in the worst case scenario, when they go to set the septic system up, if we find conditions different from what was presented by the engineer, then they need to cease the work and come back to the board to review the permit. Any change to what they're disclosing would need further review by the board. So there is a final process if need be. But again, I'm truly believe that there is a variety of soil out there, including class 1 soil and class 2 soil. And my training and my direction from DEP is you always take the more conservative approach. Maybe I said a little too much, but that's where it stands.
Hey, Rebecca.
I was just going to say that, if we requested and we require in our regulations a witnessed reading and that didn't take place, then it's not valid.
If I may, Rebecca,
Absolutely.
the soil testing was witnessed. The engineers is not agreeing with the results. In fact, the engineer originally submitted his data that agreed with my soil test logbooks and what we observed. And then down the road, changed it all on the septic plan. And he claims he found that he made errors. And again, that's still in question since he originally disclosed exactly what we found out there, and it matched what I had in my field book. But they are still saying, no, the errors were made and we corrected them. I'm going to leave that as was presented, but that's where we stand with this.
Diana?
So my question mark has to do with, so they say they get permission to move forward and they're building that tank. How would we know that conditions changed?
What happens is that if we go out there and we see more of a till type material, the more of the sandy loam is what it is in the excavated area where they're going to put the leaching area. That's where it would vary from the permit, which would, if it is to be issued based on a more sandier soil, it'll come out at that point. Unfortunately, it's way too late for it to come out. I personally feel
Mm.
wouldn't hurt to go out and do that. One is I suggest a boring be done because I think that would help the Tetra Tech in doing the hydraulic loading. The other point I'd like to make is it would also give clarity to the soils. I have pictures of the soil, and there's two types of soil out there. There's loomy sand and there's sandy loam. And the issue is that they want to say it's all loomy sand, and in my belief, it's not. And from my soil test logs and from the engineer's first submittal of his soil test logs, we were in agreement, and then it changed. I don't know what to say about that, but
You've said enough. I understand.
I think I have.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Julie.
Mark, this is more just for the record. While the sieve analysis was recommended by the peer reviewer, there was not a representative from the peer reviewer on site to witness the sampling. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Oh, and I wanted to go back just a little bit, Diana, to your question to Mark about how would we find it. So it's standard procedure for Mark to go out as the septic system is being installed for just the reasons of checking on how things are going, is anything unanticipated observed, and are adjustments needed. So it's part of the normal steps. Jessica, if you could scroll down, and Deshang, I'll get to you in a moment. I just want to have the table because that might be helpful. It's a big green thing coming up. Yeah, there we go. All right, so this might be a little hard to read, but these are the test pits, and basically the upper half of the table. Oh, great. Good. Refers to there are 3 septic areas. It's all in one place, but it was called SAS 1, 2, and 3. 1 and 2 were at the top, and 3 was towards the southern end of the overall septic area for the project. As you can see, test pits 5-1, 5-2, 5-3 are in the southern half of the third. So those 3 samples represent, I didn't measure the areas exactly, but let's say a 5th to a 6th of the overall septic area. And those, as you can see in the column 1, 2, 3, in the 6th column, that's where Mark's comments about differences between what was recorded on the Form 11, which is from Deshang, fills out that form, and him. So those are blank, which means that they were in agreement that, yes, that was sandier soil. Then above are from the areas 1 and 2 of the septic system, and then something that was kind of on the border between 1 and 2, and then 3 to the south. So, and those were loamy sand to sandy loam. And there were just the 2 discrepancies where Mark showed the loamy sand to sandy loam as being present in all 4 of those other test pit locations. So in any case, there's still, here are 7 tests rather than 2 tests. So there we have it. And then the other places are just elsewhere on the property for development. So some of the test pits farther down are closer to Farm Road. And I don't remember where every single one was. But. Okay, so Deshang?
Yes, okay, well, I just want to clarify the soil texture on the form. So error or some kind of different opinion, a record. We did find out my original submittal was consistent with my notes as all loamy sand. And I think in the interim review, Mark pointed out the difference, and we we updated the second submittal with his notes, because at that time to us, I mean, I would say, well, it's loamy sand to sandy loam. We were not really that critical. And then when we get into this larger system, when we were designing it, we do feel that this is like in IEA system enhanced. And so the soil's condition, if you look at it, test fit 5510 and 5510AN. I believe these are the ones from Mark's notes. The two test pit is technically next to each other. So one is loamy sand, the other one is loamy sand to sandy loam. And that's at the pretty much at the lower southern end, which is lined up with test pit 5.1 to 5.3, probably 5.1. So those soils sampled as as a test pit. We agreed at the meeting, even though Peter didn't go, and he said as long as Mark goes is okay. And we agreed the two test pit, one at the down gradient line of the leaching field, one is upper, which is near test pit 5511. So which shows loamy sand and the sandy loam in Mark's notes here. I believe that's reflected the second version. So we corrected back to our own original note soil texture, and that's the one we try to conform it with the soil testing data. And that's what coming back at the lower down gradient edge, the soils was tested actual median sand. So it's probably not total clean sand, but it's under the USDA soil triangle plot is considered median sand. And then on the upper limit is coming back as the loamy sand. As far as the depths, so right on the side, so I was there, but so we were, I clearly remember I put the tape down and Francis was there. So if it's a 5.5 to 6 feet, that's within 6 inches. I'm not trying to dispute that, but I mean, if that things was challenged right on the side, I will be happy to have the excavator digging deeper. And the part of the reason is under Title V, we only need 4 feet of permeable soils. If the soil is below 6 feet, it's indeed sandy loam, which I doubt it, but even it doesn't matter. So Title V only require 4 feet of that soils as the one you use. If you cannot find the 4 feet you use, then you have to go to the restricted layer. That's what I understand for the Title V. So as far as the nitrogen goes, I think Bob already sending, so under even 25 milligram per liter, we are meeting the nitrogen sensitive requirement, 440 gallons per liter. And then, so this system as 13.5 is approved for provisional, but it's basically a series, 3 series of 4.5, which was approved for general use. So it's more like you just have to confirm. Of course, I don't want to say when you have 3 things, the same thing, when you put together, they will perform exactly as one single smaller system. So that's why the EP requires this provisional process to check it out. But the system itself is, we have 3 of the 4.5 system, which is approved for general use. So we had quite extensive discussion with Peter. Hopefully, at the next week's meeting, you can check with him. So as far as where the soil samples taken, we agreed one downgrade and upgrade it. If at the time we say, well, we need more than two, I would have no problem. So Bob just don't want to get another machine, get it digging more. So that in the cost perspective, I cannot say, and I feel, I mean, he has his in our opinion, the perk rate also is was down pretty much at the depths, 48 to 60 inches in that range, which is it's very consistent. It's a little bit different from Washington Street side because Washington Street and the others do have a little bit slower rate. So in at depths, but in the back, from the geological perspective, it's like really in the valley. Oh, I'm not saying it's a washout. It's definitely like a loose till. So condition, the soil, it's a Charlton old crop, but in the middle is Charlton, which is Class B soils. It's normally loamy sand. I was not expecting we'll get like a median sand kind of testing. That's also beyond my classification. So there was some sand near the isolated wetland area, which we did for the stormwater testing. We did see sand, but here we don't see it really all washed clean sand. So that's why we only classify in our soil law as loamy sand. And I'm not trying to disagree with Mark because every person sees can be a little bit different. That's why we took the soil sample as agreed for the testing at the last year December 21st meeting. So we agreed to do both as a both, which Peter confirmed so at the April's meeting. So I'm 100% clear. So it's for both. Otherwise, I don't feel So we know at that time we had some dispute on the soil tax, not dispute, or let's say you can say dispute or record discrepancy between Mark's notes and my notes. That's my side of story or recollection. So if you need any clarification from what I said, I can dig in out the email. As I said, it was not a corrections. It's like in how to remedy the difference between my notes and Mark's notes. And I feel I also contact DEP about this. It looks like there is no clarification in the DEP's in the Title V. So it's up onto the soil evaluator, how you call it, and I would not. I mean, I don't mind to go normally to the conservative side if not the perk rate is all 3 minutes to 5 minutes, and the majority is 2 to 4 minutes. At 3 to 4 minutes rate, I would, and then we have so significant nitrogen and the TSS and the BOD removal, which except the nitrogen, BOD and TSS removal for the secondary treatment is the same as the groundwater discharge quality. So 30-30-10, and this is 30-30-25. And so I will review the approval just to see if the approval say is 25, but on the other hand, Bob presented a court ruling as for the fields. So under our situation, we only need to meet the we are not aggregate nitrogen situation. The whole thing is on site acreage, so we don't have to do the nitrogen loading analysis. But since we already did it, even with 25, I'm still pretty confident the nitrogen loading to the property line is still going to be less than 10 because from 19 to 25 is not changing that much. So based on my analysis right now, under 19 is less than 5. So even we use 25, I don't think it's an issue. But again, I do think Bob will so we will do that. But I will be curious. I just even do on my own. I want to, after I read the DEP, see what's really coming out. But again, we are not required under the court ruling per the fields. So we are technically say we are not going, well, at this the applicant's position is he's not going to entertain that. We don't really see any direct sensitive receptor like wells right at the down gradient of the AOI. So thank you.
Okay, all right, thank you. So just to go over the let's see. Yes, under Title V, would the nitrogen loading be analyzed? In this circumstance, no, likely not. But in very early comments that this board provided to ZBA on the types of things that we were interested in, we indicated that the nitrogen loading analysis to us was very important and would be, we were recommending that as part of applying the Board of Health Sherborn regulations for the EHIR. But we said since the applicant was already doing the mounding analysis as part of Title V, and they were already doing the nitrogen loading analysis, that we wouldn't be seeking for them to then do an EHIR because the important components of the EHIR were being addressed by these other investigations. But now we've hit a point where we're not necessarily agreeing on the methodology, and we have questions about that. I would suggest, and we don't have to vote on this right now, but that, or we could, do we want to maintain that we'd like that analysis done as part of Sherborn-specific regulations, because this is a large project. It is a density of development that we discharge that we don't usually see. The soils are limited on the property. There was a significant amount of ledge. So this is the one good pocket of soil. The system needs to be done well because this is it. There's really not another place to move it to if this fails. And with regard to the court case at the fields, it's somewhat ironic. And unfortunately, the Board of Health was not as involved in the appeal that went before Housing Court. Town Council took care of that. We don't know the content of what went on, but at no point in that process did the Board of Health ever require that the nitrogen loading analyses be performed. What took place was some neighbors to that project hired a consultant who did a nitrogen loading analysis, making some assumptions about the site and with data that had already been published about the site. And in response, the applicant had their agent, their engineer, do the analyses as well. Then the peer reviewer, who the town had engaged, paid for by the applicant, was then reviewing the work that the engineer had done for the applicant, which included that nitrogen loading analysis. But before all of that took place, the town, after seeing what the neighbor's consultant had done, hired its own consultant separately who did that work also. So we had 4 different kind of perspectives on nitrogen loading going on, but at no point was it a requirement. So it's interesting that the court evaluated the situation as it did. So I just wanted to let the rest of the board know.
Can I make a statement?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you for reviewing that. I feel that since that time, there have been a couple cases in which the state acknowledged the importance of the public health issue. And I think we should focus on that because the nitrogen loading is significant from a public health perspective. And this is a new project and a few years later. So I think we should focus on the merits of this situation. And I personally would think that the board should request the AHIR because, number one, it's possible that the drought has ended that we were in. It's possible that some of the testing, if there would be a value to repeating some of that testing right now. I also think that the geology and some of the circumstances in this particular location might be different. And I think that there is, because as you mentioned, there is no alternative site if something fails. I do think that it would be valuable to have that information for us to be able to address the public health risks and make a good decision for the town. So I would vote in favor of requesting the AHIR in this particular case.
Okay. Anybody else?
I agree with Rebecca in that we had basically said that the EHIR was satisfied in the context of this work being done, and I think that it does need to be done. While the down gradient receptors might not be within the property line, they're not that far away, and there are a number of private wells that are certainly downstream of the AOIs, and I think we need to understand that better to those existing wells and those private water supplies.
I concur. I mean, we've got concerns, and once the project's in place, it's a bit late.
There's also, I don't know whether this is relevant, but recently I had the opportunity to read a study that was done for another project in town, done by the company Woodard and Curran. And what they were discussing was the characteristics of the geology when there's a significant amount of ledge, the distances that are safe for avoiding potential risk to a butter's wells might be much greater because there isn't an ability for the refuse or whatever the output of a septic system might not be absorbed. So it could extend to much greater distances and have potential to endanger wells of abutters who aren't direct about, nearby people who aren't direct abutters. And so that is another reason that I think it would be valuable to obtain that information. Sorry to talk about unrelated subjects, but I think there may be a relevance.
No, it is relevant because I had prepared some slides back in December that I had hoped to present to the ZBA as just background for groundwater dynamics, like what's the overburden aquifer and what are the bedrock wells tapping into, what are fractures, what directions do they go, what are they shaped like, that kind of thing. So I never got to do that because there was never time at any of the meetings. So I took those slides, I added some text as briefly as I could to try and explain a little bit. But basically, we have soil, and underneath the soil is bedrock, and usually somewhere in between the surface of the earth and the bedrock, there's a water table in there. So that's what we're always looking at when we're looking at depths of groundwater beneath septic leaching field. So, and then once you hit the bedrock, that's where our groundwater wells are. And there's just, that's a different level of water. That's within the fractures, different set of circumstances, but they are interconnected because those fractures are coming up and meeting that interface with the soil above. So water moves more slowly in the soil, but moves rather fast in the fractures because they are cracks. They might be filled with material, but they're not always. And really, almost any hydrogeologist I've spoken to talks about how rapidly it moves. It could be an order of magnitude or more faster. So that is a concern, and it also changes the issue of whether something is up gradient or down gradient, because those gradients, we're usually talking about the overburden, the slope of the water table in the soils, which is different than in the bedrock fractures, and we don't really understand fully the bedrock fractures. Harder to measure, harder to do remote sensing of that to even determine what that is. But once that water percolates through the soil and hits the interface with the bedrock, if there are fractures there, it gets in there and it can move in any direction. It's not going to be just in the direction of, general flow, which we usually associate as matching pretty much the side of a mountain. It's going to be flowing down the side of the mountain. But in the bedrock, it could go cross gradient and underneath the tip of the mountain. So in any case, it's kind of a little complicated, but it also speaks to exactly what Rebecca was saying, that Woodard and Curran, which was the firm that the town used to do some groundwater studies in the past, for general understanding of what was going on in town. And we're talking about that the distances traveled through fractures is much greater.
And Darrell, if I can add to it too, that is 100% correct. And then even with the overburden, when I was out soil testing, I always use my USDA soil type. You can do it over a web application and a GPS that locates you. And the soils there are Charlton and Hollis. We had 35% Hollis soils per the USDA soil information and 20% Charlton. And that will give you if you look those up on the web, it will tell you what type of overburdens there are there and how the drainage occurs, the hydraulic loading. That could make it so much easier for everyone. And I already have that data from standing on that site for the web application that tells you what's there. And when you read that, you're going to find it says fine sandy loam, some rock fractures, and that alone speaks, in my view, to a loud volume that I'm hoping our consultants are looking at as well. They can do that through the soil map, so they can go right on the site and use the web application. But I just wanted to add that to it, that we know more from that type of mapping as well than what has not been presented by the applicant.
And so I think if we go farther down too in these notes, there were some other things that really follow from, why are we concerned about the soil types aside from just getting the mounding right and all the rest? But another concern is that if you're assuming that the effluent is moving faster through the soil, than it may be in reality, right? So finer, coarser sands and sand in general, right? Water passes through more easily than through the loam, certainly faster than through clay. So you have this spectrum of what water can move through easily and the speed at which it does that. That affects the Title V standards for how many gallons a square foot of the SAS can accept for moving it through appropriately. So the choice between a more conservative and less conservative soil is that this system might be undersized by as much as 20 or so percent if it's using something it's assuming is going to move the effluent through quickly. And some other point. wanted to make related to that, and it's gone. So, but that's part of what this concern is that once it's built, and it doesn't seem like there's a lot more area that system could be expanded if they detect troubles with that.
Correct.
You
And
know,
that's
like what's going to happen if it's not sized properly? And again, using the conservative, and we saw that by Mark's analysis, 4 out of the 7 samples were sandy loam to loamy sand, and the others were in agreement that they were sandier and coarser in that one part of the system. So it's skewed right now to that smaller percentage of the system being used to represent. And here's the other point. The system is being sized for 550 gallons an acre, and that's because of the nitrogen reduction. So to say that one cannot use the conservative soil in this case because you've got this margin of safety, well, you've already used up that margin of safety by adding another 25% in the volume that's going to be discharged. So I don't think you could count that twice and get the benefits from that twice.
well, and if I can add, Darrell, to that, so normally if someone, in case the board members, others don't know, it should have been 440 gallons maximum per acre or per bedroom. It's done that way per a Title V acre, which is 40,000 square feet. But the other thing I wanted to note, though, is that this system is being built under Title V requirements only. And I will say that our regulations were developed by engineers and scientists and so forth. And already this system's closer to the wetlands than would be allowed if it was a Sherborn Board of Health system that would have been engineered and environmentally to greater sound. Second, we don't know if anyone will use garbage grinders because there's no knowledge or no deed recordings that we would normally require. We would normally require 5 feet of suitable soil for the septic system under our regulations. I respect the fact this is all under Title V. I'm just showing the comparison. Environmental health.
And we're supposed to comment on which things that we would accept Title V and which ones we recommend not. So we should,
Very concerning that the EHIR regulations aren't being utilized, but in our regulation 3. And as I noted, the USDA already tells us a big story about the type of soil that's out there that it more or less agrees with the fine sandy loam, not the loomy sand is being disclosed by the applicant. With that said, and the Caltech contractors are using, we're not for sure if those are even allowed. I'm waiting for a response from DEP, but I've said enough, and I just wanted to add that to it, that this is already an environmentally sensitive concern in my view.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. You mentioned what is the depth to groundwater for the system right now? Below the SAS?
4 feet is what they're allowed, so that's.
I know, but are they exceeding 4 feet?
I'd have to. The problem, they didn't have a profile on the plan.
Oh,
so
yep.
To go to the chart.
All right, you don't have to answer that now. It's very late.
No, we do. If I can answer, we have probably more than 6 feet. So even with groundwater mounting, so so that's what I.
With the groundwater mounting, correct? If I may, Darrell, through you to the engineer, with the groundwater mounting, is that 6 feet? Is what you're? If I may, through you, Darrell, to the engineer.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, with with about 1.57 feet of groundwater mounting added to it. So we presented in the table with the profile on the latest plan, and also in the response to the peer review.
Yeah, Daisheng, if you can provide the paper plan, I know you did provide us, an electronic. It would be easier for a review to have a paper plan of that groundwater profile that you discussed and the profile that was requested by Peter Dillon at our meeting back on April 29th. That would be fantastic if you can submit that to us as a paper plan.
Yeah, you mean the septic plan or just for the groundwater mounting that table?
Well, we've been asking since the deficiency letter sent out in January for a groundwater profile, including at the tank area. You did provide a chart. You did provide a chart, but we have not yet seen the profile, the groundwater profile. That it's a cross section. You know what it is. It's a cut through. You
Yeah,
did.
no, it is there. It is in the plan. It's a.
We don't have. That's fine. Just if you could submit that plan to our department as well for review, I'd appreciate it. And I'm at a loss without it. Thank you.
I will. I think it's in the septic plan, but I will.
No, you only provided a chart in the most recent one, which was dated again, and we can talk offline, but
right, yeah. I agree. Yeah, we haven't updated the plan with the latest groundwater mounting
that would be helpful.
profile.
Thank you. If you could do that as a septic part of the septic plan submittal, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to note that it's late. I think there are lots more things to discuss, but we'll have to save that for another time. Also, the peer reviewers report may be forthcoming. That may shed light on some issues. Hard for us to know without seeing that. Does anyone else have anything? Do people want to keep going or rather conclude for now on this topic?
Daryl, I think that the letter, I think all of the information that has come in, if the rest of the board reads through that, I suspect they'll have a good stance of where we are. I am eager to see the response and report from Tetra Tech. That's what I'm really pulled up on. And I feel like we should save our discussion for review of that. Because I think we still have one or two things we have not gone through on the agenda. Yeah.
So I think, Mark, you could give just a very quick update. Deshang already talked about Washington Street, some of the details, but really just an overview of where we are in the process on Washington.
Sure. So the original plan was submitted without soil test locations where the septic system is being proposed. And just so the board knows, that's being submitted by DGT Associates. Deshang is the soil evaluator for that property, but is not completing the septic plan. So a letter of deficiency went out on the plan that was submitted to DGT and to the applicant. And we are still awaiting a new plan that shows, and I will give credit, they did go back out to do additional testing, soil testing, at the 0 Washington Street septic system location. And they did find that the ledge that we found in the earlier depots done, I think about 2 years ago, kept moving more towards the septic system. So they're going to need, and what was nice is the day we were out testing, I believe it was April 24th or 25th. It might have been the 25th. One engineer for DGT was on site as well as Deshang. And so we did an additional test in the center and determined how far the ledge went into the septic system area. So that's been done, and hopefully now we'll see a plan coming in, a revised plan with the corrections to the deficiency letter, as well as showing the new soil testing, and we'll go from there. I have not yet seen that plan, and as I said, it's coming from DGT Associates. Thank you.
Okay, and I'll just mention that we received a letter from the applicant requesting that we stay the application and approval until August 6th. I think it was 3 months out roughly, because there is some mediation going on regarding Greenwood and potentially Washington. Actually, I'm trying to remember. Sorry, I keep mixing those two up. Jessica, when I forward you the email, do you remember which one was which? Which one? I think it's Washington that they asked for a stay, because the decision has gone through. It is Washington. I'll take it back. So we have a new application for one single family home so far on Greenwood, and then
That
the
is.
stay is for Washington because of this mediation activity. But I've been informed by town administration that ZBA is really the authority who needs to agree to the stay, and so we can proceed because new information came in since that request by the applicant from Deshang in the Form 11 and other soils information. So Mark is going to be continuing to review that until the stay is agreed upon.
And I'm glad you brought that up. So related to Form 11, that came from Deshang. So I'm communicating with him. If he wants to refer that to DGT, so be it. But he's the authority as it relates to the soil evaluation that's being done on the site. And again, we had different data from what I recorded and what he recorded. And so I highlighted it immediately upon receipt on Monday. I responded immediately to Deshang on Tuesday of this week with the differences in his soil logs and what I observed. We'll see where that goes. As it relates to Greenwood, that is being handled by Deshang. He's handling the Greenwood lots. Right now, they are working towards setting up lots that meet our regulations. So presently, we have a plan that's under review for 28 Greenwood, and Deshang and I were out testing on one of the Greenwood lots next to it back on April 25th. Again, the same day we went over to Zero, Washington. But that's solely, I believe, being handled by Deshang. Thank you.
Okay. All right. All right. So that's that status update. So the last thing we have is agenda items for June 5th. And let's see. Well, let's do the reorganization then. All of it, I think, will be fine. Continue with the people who are assigned for the various burial and animal inspector roles, etc. I think that's it. Does anyone have anything else offhand? I think we'll have Farm Road and maybe Washington Street still on, perhaps Greenwood, but some of that depends on what.
Daryl, I also, didn't we say 85 Maple might be on the 5th as well?
Oh, yes.
Mark, if I may ask a question, so we submitted for 13 Mill Street for a replacement.
Deshang, offline, please. It's not on the agenda.
Oh, no,
I can't be
next
talking
week.
about something.
No, I say next.
Oh, I see. You're talking about agenda items.
Yeah,
As you asked for, we can put it down tentatively. We have to wait on conservation. Oh, no,
already,
you're talking about 13 Mill. 13 Mill,
yeah.
the same situation as 85 Maple. We have to wait on conservation. Once we get that confirmation from conservation that they're satisfied with the septic plan that's been submitted by you, that's when they'll schedule the hearing. So unfortunately, we can't do either 85 Maple, nor can we do 13 Mill Street until we get Conservation Commission.
I saw that 13 Mill, they already approved it.
Go talk to Jean or Jessica, and they will give you a date for the hearing. That's
okay,
how you.
Okay, yeah, I will. Yeah, I will make sure. Yeah, I think for 85 Maple they received it, but I think for 13 Mill Street they just did the soil testing, and actually there's no difference than the soil testing because the
all right.
site.
You know what? These are details that you can work out with Mark. We're just trying to set the agenda.
We'll yeah.
So
trying to get on the June 5th. So that's what I was.
Okay.
Mill Street.
All right. So the other thing I want to note is we have, because of holidays, we have one meeting scheduled in June, one in July, and one in August. And we often do just one in August, not necessarily because of a federal or state holiday. It's because so many people are away that in general people didn't want us having a lot of meetings then, because then they would miss it because they were away, although Zoom has changed that dynamic. But I just am saying this as a warning because of the deadlines that the Board of Health has for turning around applications and making sure it goes through the process. Otherwise, if we don't address something within 45 days of a complete application, it can be presumptively approved. which we would rather not have happen. So I'm just saying that because we might have to insert another meeting in at some point, depending on how the timing goes with applications and vis-a-vis our meetings.
Would you mind just telling me the 3 dates? So June 5th, what's the July date, and what's the August date right now?
Don't have that open. Hold on. I think it's the third Wednesday of both July and August.
Okay.
I could email that to you. How about that?
That would be great. Thank
In
you.
a moment.
It's July 17th, which is the third Wednesday, and it is August 21st, also the third Wednesday.
Great.
And
Thank you.
for future reference, right on the Board of Health website is the calendar for meeting dates. So you can always go there if you want to check.
Would be, I was just, if you had it, that would save me a step. Thanks.
Okay, but that's where it is for anybody who's listening.
Yeah.
All right. I believe we are done. So do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Seconded.
Any other discussion? Hearing none?
Julie Dreyfus, aye.
Diana Hook, aye.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
Daryl Beardsley, aye. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, have a good night, everybody.
Okay, good night.
Thank you.
Good night.